Norway. It's a small, cold, desolate, but very nice looking country. Everyone's heard of Norway and many people want their countries to be more like Norway. Why is that? It's because Norway is one of the world's richest countries, second richest per capita if you exclude micronations, and consistently ranks high on multiple metrics measuring human happiness. It's the 6th happiest nation, 7th by life satisfaction, and 1st in the Human Development Index. The Norwegians seem to be living some of the best lives worldwide. Why is Norway so rich and happy? My thinking is that it has to do with location. Norway's unique location on Earth has allowed it to flourish in a way no other could. 3 locations means 3 points, and I will tell you 3 reasons why Norway's geography has made it rich and kept it happy. Number 1. Norway's geography has kept its population tiny. Norway sits at the edge of Europe on the top of the Scandinavian peninsula. Its terrain has made some great destinations, but when trying to survive, it's not the greatest. A topographical map of Norway and Scandinavia in general shows this problem. Norway is very mountainous, with the Scandinavian mountains running through almost the entire country, marking the border between Norway and Sweden, and the fjords running along Norway's tadpole-shaped country also made it hard to get to the water without plummeting 1,000 meters. The mountains and lack of easy trading along the coast has made Norway a very hard nation to develop, and for the most part has made Norway a low-populated, poor country. There's some hope in the south though, where flat land made it able to develop ports and its largest city, Oslo, where most people lived and still live today, but the rest of the population was still sparsely spread, mostly throughout coastal towns that could actually be accessed. Fortunately, the mountains and fjords also made Norway extremely hard to conquer from neighboring Sweden. They did succeed a couple of times, but for the most part, Norway was safe. Its climate also didn't bring bountiful amounts of people. Norway is mostly tundra and subarctic terrain, with an oceanic climate on its coast. Subarctic equals cold, and cold equals dying crops. You simply can't farm in cold areas, limiting the population Norway could reach. This has given Norway a rather small population today of about 5 million inhabitants, and when you have plenty of money and little people, it is very easy for everybody to get rich. However, Norway's population is steadily growing every year, having a stable population pyramid. This means that in 20 years, Norway will have 6.2 million people, and by 2100, they should have around 7.9 million people, which, is still much less below being considered a large population. Don't get me wrong, for most of Norwegian history, the population limiting geography has been awful for the growth of the nation, being limited to a weak third world nation. But now that Norway has developed into one of the richest countries on Earth, its small but steadily growing population is great for keeping it wealthy. Number 2. Norway's neighbors. Although for most of history the Scandinavian nations have been beefing and fighting with each other, for the last 50 to 100 years they've been some of the most bitch-ass peaceful nations on Earth. Let's look at its modern history. Even though the Viking Age brought Norway to power, pillaging for fun, Norse values were soon replaced by Christian values and pillaging was no longer cool. The 1300s brought a golden age to Norway, having its peak territory, a period of peace, and intense trade with the outside world, until the Black Death hit and ruined it. There was a union with Sweden and Denmark, blah blah blah, famine, blah blah blah, union with Sweden again, vote for independence that passed, and we get to World War I, the start of Norway's modern history. Norway was neutral throughout World War I, but heavily favored the Allies. They were hit by the Great Depression like the rest of Europe was, and suffered a broken economy. Norway was also neutral in World War II, but invaded by Germany for their natural resources. They quickly surrendered, but there was a decently sized resistance force, at least for their size. World War II's end brought peace to Europe and a time of rebuilding when half the continent was destroyed. The United States, under the Marshall Plan, who was experiencing an economic boom, would give most of Europe the funds they needed to rebuild themselves. This included Norway. What Europe realized from fighting the biggest war in human history was that war was not a fun thing to do, and they would try anything to stop another one. This included the formation of Nato, a military alliance between most of Europe headed by the US. Norway joined Nato in 1949, as well as the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. World War II's tragedy also led to the creation of the European Union, and even though Norway never joined the EU, they have made the European Free Trade Agreement with other non-EU nations. The EU has undoubtedly integrated Europe together and made a continent-wide war much more unlikely than it has ever been. NATO has only strengthened that reality. And even if a continental war were to happen, Norway is so out of the way that it could likely just not get involved. Its neighbors Sweden and Finland are members of the EU and not of NATO, so technically the neighbors aren't in any union with each other, but the unions are so integrated that war is highly unlikely between the Scandinavian states. World War II brought a pacifist culture to Europe, especially Scandinavia, which has given Norway one of the most stable locations on Earth. And number 3, one of the biggest events in its modern history, Norway's natural resource supply was changed forever when they found oil! In 1969, a massive oil field was found inside of Norway's exclusive economic zone in the middle of the North Sea. This was known as the Greater Ekofisk area. Subsequently, a state-owned oil company was set up called Statoil, but later merged with Norsk Hydro to make Equinor. The state owns 2/3 of the share of Equinor, but even though they own it, its name shows its true purpose. Equi in Equinor means equal, and Nor means Norway, in equal Norway, which is what the revenues of this company hope to obtain. Because there was a large capital investment into making this company, it did not actually turn a profit until the 1980s. But since then, there has been a massive increase in GDP and GDP per capita, today at $366 billion US and $68,000 US per person respectively. Whenever most nations find oil, it usually turns into a civil war, unrest, or some type of political turmoil to divide the newly found natural resources among the nation. Yet since it was a state-owned company who controlled the resource extraction, the Norwegian government was able to save the revenues it earned and transform it into one of the most extensive welfare programs on Earth for their small population. Norway's exports were able to surpass imports by 1975, and Norway was able to pay off their national debt in the late 1990s, a task which almost no first world nation accomplishes. Currently, it has the second highest productivity value in all of Europe, behind only Ireland. The state owns around 35% of all shares on the Oslo Stock Exchange, continuing its state-owned company strategy. Oil was able to transform the nation into one of the richest on Earth. Norway is like someone who wins the lottery and then invests the winnings to make them even more rich. It's no secret that Norway is rich. The secret has to do with its geography, a geography that no other nation or region can emulate. Firstly, the rugged terrain and frigid climate of Norway has limited Norwegian development and kept their population low, allowing for any profits divided between the nation to be much greater than if it had a large population. Second, modern history has made their region on Earth to be one of the most peaceful, so Norway does not have to worry about any foreign power destabilizing the country. And thirdly, the discovery of oil in the North Sea has allowed Norway to make some of the best welfare systems on Earth, contributing to a massive spike in GDP, happiness, and HDI. Norway was for most of its history poor, but modern history and modern geography has made it rich. Norway can serve as an example of what to do if your nation finds bountiful natural resources. Hopefully Norway can stay rich far into the future, and we can only hope those god-forsaken, meatball-loving, IKEA-dwelling Swedes don't ruin it for everybody.